Hey guys, Clay back again, responding to your answers to which one is your least favorite movie of all time and why. Unfortunately, some of you didn't do that, but that's okay. So, this is what you wrote. Despicable Me 3, The Dance Battle. Yeah, I know what you're saying, because I was there with you when we saw it and we got out of there angry. I hate Despicable Me 3. In fact, this made me hate all of the Despicable Me films. I haven't even watched Minions, and I don't care to see it. For me, Despicable Me 3 represents everything I hate about American animated films. It is capitalist, it's throwing what's popular at that moment with no creativity, no imagination, and in a few years from now, it's not gonna hold up as well. I don't think it holds up as well right now. The overuse of annoying sounds just to be funny, which I don't think it was funny. Like, there were points when Steve Carell's voice just became so annoying that I just couldn't stand it. And it's once again almost every trope that every American animated film has, where there's a fight in the middle, the characters get into a fight, they argue, they break up, and then they get along again at the end, which I am sick of that trope. I hate that trope so much, where there's a misunderstanding. I hate that. Tekken, it has nothing to do with the actual game, but the worst of all time, Mario Bros. Yeah, lately Mario Bros has gone a guilty pleasure following where everybody knows it's not a good movie, but we enjoy it just for the nostalgic feeling of it. I haven't seen that movie in years, so at its time I remember I enjoyed it, although the only thing I didn't like was how Mario and Luigi show up with their costumes at the very end. That was kind of a bum. But yeah, with video games, they have never been represented well enough in the big screen. Like, either they are mediocre or just horrendously bad, or they're just average. So let's see what we can expect from this year's Mortal Kombat. I'm gonna place these two responses together because they're pretty much the same thing. The first one is Noah. The second one is Exodus, Gods and Kings. Putting aside my religious beliefs, you can tell the film was just trying to capitalize on the trend of biblical movies disproving the Bible. Noah started and basically came off as Ridley Scott directing this just to piss off religious conservatives without working on the writing. It's basically the God's Not Dead of internet atheists, and other than that, the pretty good acting, there's not much going on for it. He also responds by saying, "Why did the Pharaoh look like a BDSM porn star?" Well, I mean, isn't that how they all looked back then? This is how I see Fate films related. When it comes to like these religious films from biblical stories, I don't look at them as a reinforcement of my fate. I look at them as the director's point of view about their fate, because this is their project. They're putting what they believe about fate. Some of it can be that they have fate, some of them don't have fate, but they respect it, or they see the value of having fate, or some of them, they don't like fate and they just want to tarnish it. And that's why I feel like we gotta be careful in placing these fate films as enforcing our values of life, because they're not always gonna go along with what we believe. I mean, you look at Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, you can tell that he has very strong Catholic beliefs. Not very healthy ones, but he has some. Martin Scorsese in The Last Temptation of Christ, the story of Jesus, he who has as well Catholic background, and he once tried to be like a father in the church, but he wanted to interpret Jesus in his film as somebody who was more human than God, and that infuriated a lot of Christians. But it wasn't done so in a blasphemous way, even though it did sort of come up like that. Or you look at the directors from Son of God, which was more conservative and followed the Bible accordingly. So you can tell that these were much more Christian-based people. There's even a classic Italian film from the 60s, The Gospel According to St. Matthew, which tells the story of Jesus. The director was an atheist and the Jesus actor was gay, but they don't add or take away anything that's in the Gospel of Matthew. Like, they stay as respectful and they follow the Gospel as it was written. So you can tell that director, despite of not having any fate, he respects fate and wanted to represent it accordingly. And with Noah and Exodus, when you look at the directors, these two directors, they were pretty much atheists, and you can tell as well that they are not very fond of the Old Testament God, since in Noah they represent God as a maniacal psychopath who drives Noah into insanity to kill off his family on the boat. And in Exodus, God is represented as this spoiled brat kid who wants everybody to bow down to him, and that's why he punishes the whole world just so that everybody can fear him and worship him. I get why someone would not like Noah or Exodus, because I know Noah, especially Noah, is very inconsistent with theology and biblical scripture. Like you got the fallen angels helping Noah build the ark, which is not in the Bible. Noah becoming a killer psychopath, which is not in the Bible. And Exodus as well, just by just representing God as this spoiled brat. I personally can separate the fate films related message with my beliefs about fate, because again, like I said, this is the director's interpretation about their fate. If he's not representing me, he's representing himself. And most people will agree with his interpretation. Most people will not. And that's why, like in Noah and Exodus, a lot of people didn't agree with these directors' interpretation. Some of them did. And I don't blame anyone who doesn't like Noah or Exodus. Just like I don't blame anyone who does like Noah or Exodus. George of the Jungle, because it's just such a bad movie. Hey, I like George. He's a sweet idiot. I'll even say I even like the second one better, to be honest, for how over the top, silly, and just all over the place it is. It is such a live action cartoon of itself that you can't just... It is so hilarious. It's funny. I think it's funny. Sharknado don't need explanation. Just by the title itself, it's already explained. The Witch. What? No. Okay, I'm gonna guess why I think you didn't like it. Maybe you thought because it was slow paced, because it was boring, I guess. Or also it had to do with any of the religious messages or religious symbolisms that it has. When it comes to these type of horror films, they don't rely much on cheap jump scares, because jump scares doesn't mean that it's a good scary movie. That is just a cheap way to scare somebody when they make the music go loud, like bum. The Witch is a slow-paced psychological thriller that pretty much emphasizes the fears of back then during the Puritan days, based on their religion as well. And also, I think it also relates a lot to the fears that even religious circles like ours do get these type of fears. For example, in the movie there's the fear of not being holy enough to be good, and the only way we're gonna find out if we're good is when we die. You know, that's a real fear that people who have religious backgrounds have. Like, I've had these type of fears, and sometimes I even think about it most of the days I think about that. The fear of puberty and discovering your body, because in the film the young girl is turning into a woman, so there's a lot of sexual references in there. Like the rabbit is often used in witchcraft as a symbol of fertility and sexuality. That's why you see the rabbit logo in the Playboy magazines. And again, that's a real fear that it is placed down in our circle, because it's one thing to have sex outside of marriage. It's another to learn what triggers our body, because it is a sense that we all have, and we all have to come to terms eventually so that it can help us have a better relationship with our spouse or wife. But anything related to our body is placed in the adultery category, which if it's placed into suppression, that can lead to more immorality, if I can put it lightly. Also, the fear of leaving your congregation. That is a real fear that it is placed down even to this day in our congregation churches. If you leave the church, then you've abandoned God, you're in sin, and that's how the movie starts. This family leaves their congregation, and that leaves a lot of open interpretations. Were they actually cursed by a witch because they left their church, meaning that they left God? Or is it just the power of suggestion because they grew up with this sort of environment where Christianity back then would emphasize more Satan, hell, God's punishment instead of the love of God? Rather, they were placed with this fear of detecting these diabolical symbols like the black goat. So, were they actually cursed, or was it just all psychological minds? And that's why I like The Witch so much, because it leaves so much interpretation to make up your own mind about what it is. If you think this family was cursed, you're not wrong. If you think this family was just influenced by the power of suggestion, it was all a psychological, then you're not wrong again. These are the type of films that they don't give you a clear answer. You have to think of it by your own and make up your own conclusion, and that is what's so good about these type of films. Like, anybody can have their own interpretation and nobody is wrong. The Last Airbender. It is just awful. Usually movies aren't as good as the books, but they butchered the plot and characters, not to mention how they pronounce Aang and Sokka. Okay, I don't know if I pronounced the names correctly, so I'm sorry if I did mispronounce them. I didn't grow up watching the Avatar cartoon shows, but I'm aware that it has a strong fan base and that it is really good. And just without knowing any of the context of the TV show, I can confirm to you that I couldn't follow anything that was happening. Like, at the first 10 minutes of the film, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know who those two characters were who were traveling in the ice. I didn't know who the Aang boy was at the opening when they find him. I didn't know who that villain was, that young kid at the beginning. And once we got into it, I pretty much could care less. Like, it was hard for me to follow. It just simply became plot explanation, then action, plot, action, and there was no moment where I could know who these characters were. I could not get invested in their journey because I didn't get what was the high stakes. I didn't feel the high stakes. And poor M. Night Shyamalan, because at first he had a strong beginning as a director, because after he did The Sixth Sense and he was considered the new Steven Spielberg, but after that he had so many questionable decisions that he has done over the past years with his movies, and so far, like, The Last Airbender has been considered his worst movie he's ever made. And for somebody who loves to lecture us about life, I thought he would do that in Last Airbender, and surprisingly, there was not much of that. The only good thing I will say is that the climax at the end was shot very gorgeously. I thought the climax looked really gorgeous, regardless of how it turned out to be. Dragon Ball Evolution, my guy. Okay, this is my Last Airbender. I hate Dragon Ball Evolution because I grew up watching Dragon Ball Z, and it is not like the TV show. Just by the actor who plays Goku himself, like, he's not a bad actor. Like, I've seen him like in Shameless, and he's pretty good. But here, he was pretty badly miscasted. Like, he was not a good Goku. They try to play these characters to make them seem witty and charming, but instead they come up so awkward, so cringe-worthy, and I just could not relate to them as I did in the show. Also, it was such a generic alien invading story. I haven't seen that movie in years, but I remember it was so bad. Like, the special effects, the actors, everything, the story. It was awful. Awful! To be honest, Man of Steel was a better Dragon Ball movie than this one. And now that I think about it, this one actually looks a lot like The Last Airbender. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I should do a comparison of these two. Which one is the worst? The Last Airbender or Dragon Ball Evolution? If you want to see that comparison someday, you guys let me know. I'll do it anyways, whenever I get the time. For me, my worst movie of all time is the movie called Third Person. It's because it was one of the worst Liam Neeson films that I have ever watched in my life, and it's truly an oh heck no moment. I haven't seen that movie, but I saw who the director was, and he's the guy who did Crash, one of the, from 2006, I guess? Yeah, from 2006. No, 2005. Well, this is the director who did Crash, one of the worst Oscar-winning films I have seen so far. Like the movie, it is that Crash movie. It is so bad. It doesn't hold up today. So without knowing what the third person is about, only that it is about love, let me guess. It's gonna try to lecture me about love, but in such a hypocritical, unrealistic, and self-aware manner where it feels like it's saying something important, but it comes off as ungenuine. If I was close with that guess, let me know, please. Final Destination. Good concept, can't cheat dead, has so much more potential to be done better in a horror movie than what it turned out to be. Yeah, at first the concept of that nobody can escape death, that's a good concept and that is a real fear. Like eventually we all are gonna have to go through that. But instead, death in this movie comes off more like a serial killer like Chucky or Michael Jackson that it is so hilarious as the sequels progressed. The best way to describe the Final Destination movies is a very expensive episode of 1000 Ways to Die. Without a doubt, my least favorite movie is Transformers Age of Extinction. I saw it at a drive-in several years ago. If the movie had been shorter, it might not have been so bad. But it was nearly 3 hours of non-stop explosions. As I watched, I felt my brain cell dying. Me too. There was literally no story to speak of. Enraged by what I was seeing, I wanted to leave the drive-in, but I was waiting to watch the next movie. It's unfortunate that one of my last experiences at a drive-in had to be so bad. I'm sorry about what you went through. Yeah, Transformers is a very easy one to pick on because you can tell Michael Bay has no passion. He does not care about the Transformer series or any of the franchise. Like none of his Transformer movies have been good. Not even the first one. So far, the only one that has been good is Bumblebee, but that's because he didn't direct it. You can tell, like in these movies, he's so ashamed that he's making a toy movie, and so he puts so much emphasis on something that's like the army, something that has nothing to do with Transformers. The Room. Wait, people still hate that movie? Okay, for those of you who don't know, The Room is considered to be one of the worst films ever made, but it has its own category. It is so bad, it's so good. The acting is bad, the dialogue is bad, the execution is far worse, and for some reason, it is enjoyably hilarious in a bad way. The guy Tommy Wiseau, who directed it, started on it, produced it, and screenplay wrote it, he has become an enigma in Hollywood, in any movie related business. He has a passion for cinema, he loves movies, but they come out so weird, so oddly placed together. And over the years, this film has become a cult following about what was supposed to be serious romantic triangle love about betrayal and tragedy, and then turns into this oddly put together, just funny, unintentionally funny experience. But so far, like The Room, it's a classic bad movie that you have to see to believe it. And they made a biographical movie about the making of The Room. It's in Netflix. It's called The Disaster Artist with James Franco. So go look at it. Straight Outta Compton was whack and unrealistic, especially when you know the facts about your favorite group. It had a lot of inconsistencies. Well, since it's a biographical movie, it's gonna have plenty of inconsistencies just to keep it entertaining as a movie adaptation. Like you look at Bohemian Rhapsody, that had a lot of inconsistencies, but it was done so just to keep the film as entertaining. So yeah, it's gonna happen with a lot of biographical movies, but at least it gives an open door for us to go back and look into the actual history of this person and judge it for ourselves. So mine was Twilight. It seemed like a good movie having werewolves and vampires going at it, but soon as I saw it, I'm like, what the heck is this garbage? I felt disappointed. As a horror fan, I expected a good old fight between these two iconic characters, and instead, we got a hopeless romantic satire. Well, if you want a classic horror monster fight, just go watch Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman. That was an awesome fight. Kind of. Yeah, the Twilight Saga is gonna have a poor legacy, to be honest, because I've met some of those fans who grew up with Twilight and they used to love it to death, and now they look back into it and they look at it now as a guilty pleasure. You know, they realize that the Twilight Saga is not a good movie because the Bella, she's not a good role model for kids, being somebody that hurts herself just to get the attention of her boyfriends. Even the actors weren't so thrilled about the film, like Robert Pattinson, he was not a fan of the Twilight Saga. And it even inspired some fan fictions like 50 Shades of Grey. Yeah, like Twilight inspired 50 Shades of Grey, and 50 Shades of Grey inspired 365 Days. That's in Netflix. Though I don't think it's fair to label these actors, as bad actors just because they were in a bad movie. Like Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, they've done pretty good work after that. I don't mind that it was a romantic tale with werewolves and vampires, just as long as it was good, and no, not so much. Suicide Squad, because it's not comic book accurate. They romanticize Harley and the Joker's relationship way too much. There is no explanation needed for Twilight. Haha, she's replying to the Twilight comment. I haven't seen Suicide Squad since I first saw it in the theaters because I had no desire to see it because I just feel cringe. I feel cringiness when I see it. Like, it is so unbalanced. The tone is all over the place. It wants to be dark, it wants to be funny, and it was because of back then when DC was freaking out because Batman vs Superman did so bad at the box office and critically because of how dark it was, and that it wasn't like Marvel where it was funny and colorful, and that's why DC had to reshot a lot of scenes in Suicide Squad just to make it seem more like a Marvel film instead of its own story. Also, I'm sick of these all-powerful aliens who go against these nobodies, these superheroes that are weaker than these guys, and all of a sudden they get beaten just very quickly. Suicide Squad fell into that trap of following those same tropes in every superhero movie, and it just came out poorly as well. And like you said, the Harley Quinn and the Joker relationship, yeah, I get it, because the Joker, he was not well interpreted in this one. And plus, the relationship in the comic books as well as in the cartoons, they're supposed to be like this toxic relationship where the Joker abuses Harley Quinn but uses her just for his evil schemes, but Harley Quinn stays with him because she's obsessed with him. It's a toxic environment. It's a toxic relationship with these two. And for some reason, looking at the new trailer for the new Suicide Squad, I'm not that excited, to be honest. I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's gonna be good, the film, but I hope it is, but for some odd reason, I don't feel that excited. And finally, we have The Rise of Skywalker. It's one of the only movies that infuriated me when I saw it in theater. It destroyed everything that the original trilogy and the prequels meant. For some reason, Palpatine came back, which ruined Anakin Vader's sacrifice in Return of the Jedi. All the characters that you had any attachment to are either dead or ruined. Luke is dead, Leia dies in the most stupid way, Han is dead, his cameo was the only decent thing about the movie, and Kylo Ren, which was the only good character in the trilogy. Okay, I'm gonna stop right here because he talks about how much he hates Rise of Skywalker too much. But yeah, I agree with you. I was so frustrated with this movie. I don't consider myself someone who gets angry because they didn't go with my theory of how I wanted it to be. I don't care about any fan theories because they're not canon. What I care about is if the story makes sense, and it doesn't. What bothered me the most was how half of the movie was spent on detaching itself from The Last Jedi because it got a backlash because fans got so mad with Disney about how it turned out. And I was one of the few who actually liked The Last Jedi, and this movie felt like it was so ashamed of its last movie that it was wanting to correct itself, but it just came so convoluted that in the end it turned into a big mess. For example, Palpatine, I like him. I like to see him. It was nice to see him again. He looked very creepy in this one, but it made no sense to have him there. Like, coming back as a clone is probably one of the cheapest, uncreative ways to bring someone back in a sci-fi film. The characters. When it comes to a narrative story, you gotta have characters that progress, they grow, they evolve, they learn from their mistakes, like Kylo Ren. He started off as wanting to be like Darth Vader, but then he evolves into not wanting to be somebody else, he wanted to be his own person instead. And what happens in this one? He goes back on being the Vader he wanted to be. Or look at Rey. She wanted to find meaning in herself by being a descendant of someone important. And what happens in The Last Jedi? Her parents were nobodies, no one special. So now she has to discover her own value within herself. And what happens in here? She is a daughter of somebody really important, so now I guess she feels she's more important now. So instead of these characters progressing, moving forward, they went backwards, and it just felt so convoluted. As for Leia's death, I mean, what can you do? The actress died before they could film, so they had to go with what they had. So regardless of how it would have turned out, it wouldn't have been as satisfying because the actress wasn't there. So I gotta give them that. I did like the Kylo Ren redemption with Han Solo, and I actually like the ending as well, except for the Rise Skywalker line. But overall, I have so many things against Rise of Skywalker that I can't emphasize it on this video. So these are all the replies I had. Thank you for responding, and I'm still gonna do the Phantom of the Opera comparison, so hopefully I'll see you later. Until then, see you next time.